Shawn Allen stood at the iron gate of the mansion he had paid for in full, staring at a place that no longer felt like home. Beyond the glass doors, his family moved freely through rooms filled with light, laughing, comfortable, secure. He had given them that security. He had built the empire that made every luxury possible. But now, dressed in torn clothing, gripping a single weathered bag, he didn't feel like the man who owned it all. He felt like a problem waiting to be solved. What Shawn didn't know was that the next 7 days would strip away every illusion he held about loyalty, family, and love, and reveal a truth so brutal, he would never see success the same way again. Shawn Allen stood at the iron gate of the house he had paid for, staring at a place that no longer felt like home. The driveway stretched before him like a judgment. Smooth stone, perfectly maintained, leading to double doors framed by windows that reflected wealth in every angle. His family moved inside, visible through the glass, relaxed and radiant in the life he had built for them. But Shawn didn't look like a builder anymore. His clothes were torn at the shoulders. His shoes were scuffed and worn. His hair, usually groomed for boardrooms and galas, fell untrimmed across his forehead. The bag in his hand, his only possession, hung heavy, tilted awkwardly against his back. He didn't feel like the owner. He felt like a stranger begging for entry. What Shawn didn't know was that this moment would shatter everything he believed about family, loyalty, and love, and replace it with a truth he was never prepared to face. Before we continue, if stories about humanity, sacrifice, and the real cost of success touch your heart, take a moment to support this journey. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and help spread these stories to others who need to hear them. Now let's begin. Shawn Allen was a self-made billionaire, but he hadn't started that way. He grew up in a one-bedroom apartment where the walls were so thin you could hear neighbors breathing. His mother worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves during the day. His father left when Shawn was 8 and never looked back. Shawn learned early that security wasn't given. It was built, alone. At 16, he worked construction sites during scorching summers, his hands blistered and raw. At night, he studied business books borrowed from the library, falling asleep with highlighters still in his grip. At 25, he started his first logistics company with a borrowed truck and a backpack full of hope. At 40, he was a billionaire, but success came with a cost he didn't notice at first. Family dinners turned into scheduled events. Conversations grew shorter, shallower. When Shawn spoke, people listened, but not because they cared, because he paid for everything. Some nights, he sat alone at his massive dining table long after the house had gone silent. He would set 4 plates out of habit, pause, then remove 3 and eat in the cold quiet. The echo wasn't loud, but it was heavy. That loneliness planted a question he couldn't ignore. If everything disappeared tomorrow, would anyone still choose me? The question haunted him like a ghost in his own home. So Shawn made a decision that shocked even himself. He handed temporary control of his empire to his legal team. He withdrew a small amount of cash, barely enough for a week. He left behind his watch, his credit cards, his phone, his assistants, his private car. And he went home looking like a man who had lost everything. He wanted the truth, no matter how much it cost. When Shawn reached the gate, the house was alive with sound. Laughter drifted through open windows. His siblings were gathered on the patio, glasses raised, faces relaxed. His wife moved through the kitchen, elegant and unburdened. His eldest son scrolled through his phone, barely present but comfortable. Shawn's worn shoes scraped against the stone driveway. The laughter stopped. His brother turned first, eyes narrowing. His sister's smile faded. His son looked up, confusion crossing his face. Then recognition. Then something worse than confusion. Judgment. "Shawn?" His wife called out, stepping closer. Her voice was careful. What happened to you?" Shawn swallowed hard. The words felt like broken glass in his throat. "I lost it all. Silence. Not the concerned kind. The suspicious kind. Bad investments, he continued quietly. Lawsuits. Everything's gone. His brother scoffed. You expect us to believe that? His sister crossed her arms, her expression hardening. So what now? You're broke. Shawn nodded slowly. I just need a place to stay. I need my family. The words hung in the air like smoke. Then his brother stepped back. This isn't funny, Shawn. I'm serious, Shawn said. His son avoided his eyes completely. Dad. Maybe a hotel would be better. His wife looked torn but said nothing. Then came the words that shattered him. We worked hard for this life, his sister said, voice cold and final. We can't risk it. Shawn didn't always stand at iron gates wondering if he belonged. There was a time when he didn't have gates at all. Just a rusted fire escape and a door that never locked properly. He grew up in a one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Cleveland. The kind of place where you could hear everything. Arguments through thin walls. Footsteps above your head at 3 in the morning. The hum of the refrigerator that only worked half the time. His mother, Linda, worked 2 jobs. She cleaned offices downtown from midnight to 6, then stocked shelves at a grocery store until 2 in the afternoon. Shawn would wake up some mornings and find her asleep at the kitchen table, still in her work uniform, too exhausted to make it to the couch. His father left when Shawn was 7. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Linda never talked about it. But Shawn remembered the way she started setting the table for 2 instead of 3. How she stopped humming while she cooked. How the apartment got quieter, colder, even in summer. That silence taught Shawn something he would carry for the rest of his life. Security wasn't given. It was built. Alone. At 16, Shawn got his first real job on a construction site. The foreman didn't care that he was young. He cared that Shawn showed up on time and didn't complain. So Shawn worked, hauling cement, climbing scaffolding. His hands blistered so badly that some nights he couldn't grip a fork. But every night, no matter how tired, he studied. Business books from the library, marketing strategies, financial planning. He read until his eyes burned, because he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was never going back to that apartment. At 25, Shawn started his first logistics company with a borrowed truck and $800. It failed within 6 months. He lost everything. Slept in that truck for 3 weeks until he could scrape together enough for rent. Most people would have quit. Shawn didn't know how. He started again. Slower this time. Smarter. By 30, his company was handling shipments across 4 states. By 35, he had a fleet of 200 trucks. By 40, Shawn Allen was a billionaire. The media called him a visionary. Forbes put him on their cover. Business schools used his strategies as case studies. But success came with a price Shawn didn't see coming. The more money he made, the less his family needed him. They needed what he provided. That was different. Family dinners became scheduled events his assistant had to arrange. Birthdays were celebrated with expensive gifts delivered by someone else. Conversations at the table grew shorter, shallower, like everyone was reading from a script they'd memorized years ago. When Shawn spoke, people listened, but not because they cared what he thought, because disagreeing with the man who paid for everything felt risky. Some nights, Shawn would sit alone at his massive dining table long after everyone had scattered to their separate wings of the house. He would set out 4 plates out of habit, pause, then remove 3 and eat in silence. The echo of his fork against the plate wasn't loud, but it was heavy. One night, his youngest daughter Lily wandered into the dining room. She was 12 then, still young enough to not pretend. She sat across from him without asking. Why do you eat alone, Dad? Shawn looked up, surprised. I'm not alone. Everyone's here. Lily tilted her head. Are they? That question stayed with him. For years. By the time Lily turned 18, Shawn had built an empire worth $3.2 billion. He had everything he'd promised his mother he would build. Everything he swore would protect his family from the life he grew up in. But sitting in his office one evening, staring at quarterly reports that meant nothing, Shawn asked himself a question he'd been avoiding for too long. If everything disappeared tomorrow, would anyone still choose me? Not my money, not my status, not what I could provide. Just me. The question haunted him like a ghost in an empty house. And the more he thought about it, the more terrifying the answer became. Because Shawn couldn't remember the last time someone asked how he was doing and actually waited for the answer. He couldn't remember the last time someone sat with him just to sit, not to ask for something, not to discuss business, just to be there. So Shawn made a decision that would change everything. He was going to find out the truth, no matter what it cost him. 3 days later, Shawn sat in his lawyer's office on the 42nd floor, staring at a stack of documents that would temporarily erase him from his own empire. Marcus Chen, his attorney for 15 years, leaned back in his chair, studying Shawn like he'd lost his mind. You want to do what? Hand you control. Temporarily. 1 week. Shawn, you built this company from nothing. You can't just walk away. I'm not walking away. I'm testing something. Marcus set down his pen. Testing what exactly? Shawn hesitated. How do you explain to someone that you're terrified your own family only loves your bank account? I need to know who stays when the money's gone. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus sighed. This is a terrible idea. Probably, Shawn agreed. Do it anyway. The paperwork took hours. Temporary transfer of authority. Emergency clauses. Legal protections in case something went wrong. By the time Shawn signed the last page, the sun had set over the city skyline. That night, alone in his penthouse, Shawn began removing the pieces of his identity one by one. First, the watch. A Patek Philippe his wife had given him for their 20th anniversary. He set it on the dresser and stared at it for a full minute before walking away. Then the wallet, credit cards, Black Amex, Platinum Visa, the kind of cards that didn't have limits. He left them in a drawer and withdrew $200 in cash from an ATM on the corner. His phone was harder. That phone connected him to everything. His business, his security team, his private assistant who managed his entire life. Turning it off felt like cutting a lifeline. But he did it. By midnight, Shawn stood in front of his bathroom mirror wearing clothes he'd pulled from a donation bin behind a community center. Torn jeans, a faded shirt with a stain on the collar, shoes with worn soles. He looked like a man who'd lost everything. And for the next 7 days, that's exactly who he needed to be. The drive to his family's estate took 40 minutes. Normally, Shawn would have been chauffeured in his Mercedes. Tonight, he took a bus to the edge of town and walked the rest of the way. The closer he got, the heavier his single bag felt. Was this manipulation? Was he testing his family in a way that wasn't fair? Or was this survival? The only way to see the truth before it buried him alive? Shawn didn't have an answer, but he kept walking. When the mansion came into view, he stopped at the edge of the property. Lights glowed warm through every window. Music drifted faintly from the backyard. Laughter, the kind that only happens when people feel safe and comfortable and completely unburdened. They were happy. Without him, Shawn's chest tightened, but he forced himself forward. As he approached the driveway, he saw them all gathered on the patio. His brother Daniel, leaning back in a chair with a drink in his hand, telling some story that had everyone smiling. His sister Rebecca, elegant as always, her laugh bright and effortless. His wife Catherine, moving through the space like she owned it, which technically she did now. His son Marcus Jr. barely looked up from his phone. Shawn stepped closer. His shoes scraped against the stone driveway. The laughter stopped. Daniel turned first. His smile faded. Then Rebecca. Then Catherine. One by one, they noticed him. And one by one, their faces changed. Not with concern. With something worse. Confusion. Then recognition. Then judgment. Catherine stepped forward, her hand rising to her mouth. Shawn? My God! What happened to you? Shawn swallowed. His mouth was dry. His heart pounded so loud he could barely hear himself think. This was it. The moment everything changed. He looked at the people he'd spent his entire life protecting. The family he'd built an empire for. And he said the three words that would tear everything apart. I lost everything. The silence that followed was suffocating. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just stared at Shawn like he was something unrecognizable. Something that had wandered onto their property by mistake. Daniel set his drink down slowly. What do you mean, you lost everything? Shawn shifted the bag on his shoulder. Bad investments. Legal trouble. It all collapsed. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Legal trouble? Shawn, what did you do? I didn't do anything wrong. I just made some bad calls. Trusted the wrong people. The lies tasted bitter, but he forced them out. The company's gone. The accounts are frozen. Everything. Catherine took a step back. Actually stepped back like his failure might be contagious. How is that possible? She asked. You had accountants, lawyers, people who were supposed to prevent this. They did their best, Shawn said quietly. But when things fall apart, they fall apart fast. Marcus Jr. finally looked up from his phone. So what are you saying? You're broke. Yes. The word hung in the air like smoke. Daniel stood up, crossing his arms. And you came here because? Because I need my family, Shawn said. I need a place to stay, just for a little while, until I figure things out. He watched their faces, watched the calculations happening behind their eyes, watched them measure the cost of association. Rebecca was the first to speak. Shawn, this is a lot to process. You show up looking like this, telling us you've lost billions of dollars, and you expect us to just... I expect you to help me, Shawn interrupted. I'm your brother. You're also the one who built this whole life for us. Rebecca shot back. And now you're telling us it was all built on sand? I'm telling you I made mistakes. Mistakes that could affect all of us. Daniel's voice was cold now. Professional. If you have legal problems, Shawn, we need to protect ourselves. Catherine moved to the patio table and poured herself wine. Her hands trembled slightly. Maybe we should call your lawyer, Marcus. He'll know what to do. I already talked to him, Shawn lied. There's nothing anyone can do right now. Marcus Jr. shoved his phone in his pocket. Dad, this doesn't make sense. Last week you were fine. How does someone go from billionaire to broke in 7 days? It's been building for months, Shawn said. I just didn't tell anyone. Why not? Because I wanted to see if you'd care. Because I needed to know if you loved me or what I could give you. But Shawn didn't say that. He just looked at his son and said, I was trying to fix it myself. Rebecca walked to the edge of the patio, her arms crossed tight across her chest. When she turned back, her face had hardened into something Shawn barely recognized. We worked hard for this life, Shawn. The stability, the reputation. I have clients who trust me because they know I come from a successful family. If this gets out, if people start associating us with financial collapse, do you know what that does to me? Shawn felt something crack inside his chest. You're worried about your reputation? I'm worried about everything, Rebecca snapped. And yes, reputation matters. It's how the world works. Daniel moved closer, his voice dropping. Shawn, I say this because I care. But maybe it's better if you find somewhere else to stay. Just until things settle down. A hotel, maybe. Somewhere quiet where you can think. I don't have money for a hotel. Then we'll pay for it, Catherine said quickly. Too quickly. Just for a few nights. Until you get back on your feet. Shawn looked at his wife. Really looked at her. And saw the truth written all over her face. She didn't want him here. None of them did. Marcus Jr. wouldn't even meet his eyes anymore. Rebecca had turned away completely. Daniel stood there like a bouncer waiting for someone to leave. So that's it. Shawn asked. I'm not welcome in my own home? It's not about welcome, Daniel said carefully. It's about what's smart right now. For who? Nobody answered. Shawn felt the weight of the bag cutting into his shoulder. Felt the exhaustion of walking 2 miles in worn shoes. Felt the humiliation of standing in front of his family like a stranger begging for scraps. But most of all, he felt the cold, surgical precision of their rejection. They didn't shout. They didn't curse. They just stepped back, crossed their arms, looked away, and that was so much worse. Catherine finally broke the silence. There's a guest room above the garage. You can stay there tonight. But Shawn, we need to talk about this properly. In the morning, with clear heads. Translation: we need to figure out how to get rid of you without looking heartless. Shawn nodded slowly. The guest room, right? Nobody offered to help him with his bag. Nobody asked if he needed anything. They just stood there, waiting for him to leave. So he did. Shawn walked across the lawn toward the detached garage at the edge of the property. The guest room above it was barely furnished. A bed, a lamp, a window that looked out at the main house. He climbed the narrow stairs, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. The room was cold. Dust covered the nightstand. The bed looked like it hadn't been used in years. Shawn dropped his bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the mattress. Through the window, he could see his family on the patio. They'd already gone back to their drinks, their conversations, their laughter, like he'd never been there at all. Shawn lay back and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, he heard music playing, heard voices rising and falling in easy rhythm. And he realized something that made his hands go numb. They weren't afraid of poverty. They were afraid of being associated with it. That fear was stronger than 20 years of family dinners. Stronger than birthdays and holidays and everything he thought they'd built together. In that moment, lying alone in a room that smelled like abandonment, Shawn understood what this test had already revealed. Love wasn't here. It never had been. Shawn didn't sleep that night. He lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling while his mind replayed every moment on that patio. Every crossed arm, every averted gaze, every word that said family without meaning it. By dawn, he'd made a decision. He couldn't stay here. This test had already given him his answer, and staying any longer would only deepen the wound. He stood up, grabbed his bag, and walked to the door. The morning air was cool and still. The main house was quiet. Everyone was probably still asleep, comfortable in their beds, unburdened by the man above the garage. Shawn started down the narrow stairs, his bag slung over his shoulder. He'd leave quietly. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just disappear the same way his presence had been erased last night. He reached the bottom step when he heard a voice behind him. "Dad, wait." Shawn froze. He turned slowly and saw Lily standing in the doorway at the top of the stairs. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face creased with concern. Real concern. Not the polite, distant kind he'd seen last night. Something deeper. "Where are you going?" she asked. Shawn's throat tightened. "I think it's better if I leave." "Why?" "Because nobody wants me here, Lily. You saw what happened." She came down the stairs, her footsteps soft against the wood. When she reached him, she didn't stop. She walked right up and took the bag from his hand. "I want you here," she said quietly. Shawn felt something crack open inside him. "Lily, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Her voice was steady, calm, but there was steel beneath it. "They're scared. They're worried about what people will think. But I don't care what anyone thinks. You should. This could affect you too." "I don't care," she repeated louder now. "You're my father. That doesn't change because you lost money." Shawn stared at his daughter, the only person who'd looked at him last night like he was still human. "Everyone else acted like I was contagious," he said. "I know." Lily set his bag down on the ground. "I watched them. I saw Rebecca turn away. I saw Daniel tell you to leave. I saw Mom pour wine instead of asking if you were okay. Her eyes met his, and I've been ashamed of them ever since. They're just protecting themselves. From what? From you. Lily shook her head. That's not protection. That's cowardice. The word hung between them. Shawn wanted to defend his family, wanted to make excuses for their behavior, but he couldn't find the words because Lily was right. I can't stay here if I'm not welcome, he said finally. Then let me make you welcome. Lily picked up his bag again. Come on. You're staying in the house. Not above the garage like some kind of exile. Lily, I'm not asking, Dad. She started walking toward the main house, carrying his bag like it weighed nothing. Shawn followed, partly because he didn't know what else to do, and partly because for the first time since arriving, someone was treating him like he mattered. They entered through the kitchen door. The house was still quiet, morning light filtering through tall windows. Lily led him upstairs to one of the guest bedrooms. Proper bedrooms, with clean sheets and furniture that didn't collect dust. She set his bag down and turned to face him. You'll stay here, and if anyone has a problem with it, they can talk to me. Shawn sat on the edge of the bed. His hands trembled slightly. He'd faced boardrooms full of hostile investors without flinching. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But this? His 18-year-old daughter defending him when no one else would. This broke him. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily sat beside him. Because you're my dad. That's the only reason I need. Everyone else needs more than that. Then everyone else doesn't understand what family means. They sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, Shawn could see the estate grounds stretching out in the morning light. Everything looked peaceful, beautiful, perfect. But he knew now what lived beneath that perfection. I used to think providing for you all was enough, Shawn said quietly. That if I gave you security, comfort, everything I never had growing up, that would be enough. It was never about the money, Dad. Wasn't it? Lily looked at him, and there was something ancient in her eyes. Something that shouldn't exist in someone so young. For them, maybe, but not for me. She stood up. I'm going to make you breakfast. Real breakfast. And then we're going to figure this out together. She left before Shawn could respond. He sat alone in that guest room, the morning sun warm on his face, and realized something profound. He'd spent 40 years building an empire to protect his family. But the only person who actually protected him back was the one person who never needed his empire in the first place. Lily hadn't asked what went wrong, hadn't demanded explanations or worried about reputation. She'd just seen her father in pain and decided that was all that mattered. For the first time since starting this test, Shawn wondered if maybe the truth wasn't about who loved his money. Maybe it was about who loved him in spite of it. The house woke slowly that morning. Shawn heard footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, the distant sound of coffee being made downstairs. He stayed in the guest room, sitting by the window watching the grounds below. Around 8, Lily knocked softly and entered with a tray. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. Simple food, but it felt like a feast. Eat, she said. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in days. I haven't, Shawn admitted. It wasn't entirely a lie. The past 3 days preparing for this had been sleepless, anxious. He'd barely eaten. Lily sat across from him while he ate. She didn't fill the silence with empty questions or awkward small talk. She just sat, present, there. It was the most comfort Shawn had felt in years. When he finished, Lily took the tray. What do you want to do today? I don't know. Then I'll tell you what you're going to do. She stood up, confident and clear. You're going to live here like you belong here. Because you do. But as the day progressed, Shawn realized belonging wasn't something given freely anymore. By mid-morning, he ventured downstairs. The house felt massive and empty despite people moving through it. Catherine passed him in the hallway with a tight smile and a polite nod, but she didn't stop, didn't ask how he slept, didn't offer coffee or conversation. She just kept walking. Daniel was in the office on a business call. When Shawn appeared in the doorway, Daniel glanced up, held up one finger in a wait gesture, then turned his chair to face the window. The message was clear. Not now. Maybe not ever. Rebecca found him in the living room around noon. Shawn, we need to discuss your situation. Long term. You can't just stay here indefinitely without a plan. I'm working on a plan, Shawn said. Are you? Her tone was sharp. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've given up. Shawn felt anger flash through him, but he swallowed it down. I haven't given up. I'm just figuring out what comes next. Well, figure it out faster. This affects all of us. She left without waiting for a response. That afternoon, Shawn went outside. He couldn't sit in that house any longer, surrounded by people who treated him like a stain on expensive carpet. The backyard was sprawling. Manicured lawns, flower beds, a stone path that wound through gardens he'd paid a landscape architect $30,000 to design. It was beautiful and completely impersonal. Shawn noticed the yard work had been neglected. Weeds grew between the stones. The flower beds were overgrown. The small fountain near the patio had leaves clogging the basin. He found tools in the garden shed and got to work. He pulled weeds first, then trimmed overgrown bushes, then cleaned the fountain, scooping out soggy leaves with his bare hands. The work was simple, physical, honest, felt better than sitting in boardrooms ever had. Around 3, Daniel came outside with a drink and stood watching Shawn work. He didn't say anything for a long time, just watched. Finally, he spoke. A billionaire turned gardener. That's something I never thought I'd see. Shawn kept working. I'm just helping out. Helping? Daniel laughed, but it wasn't kind. Shawn, you don't have to perform poverty for us. It's uncomfortable to watch. I'm not performing anything. I'm pulling weeds. You're pulling weeds because you need us to feel sorry for you. It's manipulation. Shawn stood up, dirt on his hands, sweat on his forehead. Is it so hard to believe I just want to be useful? Daniel took a sip of his drink. Yes, because useful Shawn built companies. This Shawn is just sad. He walked back inside. Shawn stood there, holding a handful of weeds, and realized how quickly respect disappears when power does. But then he heard footsteps behind him. Soft, careful. Lily appeared, carrying a water bottle. You don't have to listen to him. He's not wrong, though. This must look pathetic. It looks honest. Lily handed him the water. You want to know what's pathetic? Watching everyone avoid you like you're invisible. That's pathetic. Shawn drank deeply. The water was cold and perfect. Thank you. For water. For seeing me. They worked together for the next hour. Lily didn't know much about gardening, but she tried. They cleared the fountain completely, reset some of the stones along the path, and planted new flowers in the empty spots. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was real. That evening, as they cleaned up, Lily mentioned something casually. Too casually. I'm taking a gap year, by the way. Shawn froze. What? Lily, you got into Stanford. Full scholarship. I know. So why? Because I need time to figure things out. And I don't need college right now. Shawn's chest tightened. Is this because of me? Because of what happened? Lily didn't answer directly. She just kept coiling the garden hose. I made my decision. It's done. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Shawn walked past the home office. The door was cracked open. He saw something in the trash can that made his blood freeze. Payment confirmation. From Stanford. Cancelled. Lily hadn't deferred. She'd withdrawn completely. And according to the date on the receipt, she'd done it 3 days ago. Right after Shawn arrived. His hands started shaking. He pulled the receipt out of the trash and stared at it. the numbers blurring. She'd given up her future because she thought he needed her. Shawn walked back to his room in a daze. He sat on the edge of the bed, the receipts still in his hand, and felt the full weight of what this test had revealed. Everyone else saw his fall as a threat, a liability, something to distance themselves from. But Lily saw it as a reason to stay closer. Shawn reached into his pocket and felt the smooth metal of his watch. The one he'd hidden there on the first day. The emergency exit. The proof that all of this was temporary. One phone call. One conversation. And he could end this test right now. But he didn't make the call. Because the truth wasn't finished revealing itself yet. And Shawn had to see it through. The house settled into silence around midnight. Shawn lay in the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, the Stanford receipt still folded in his pocket like evidence of something he couldn't name. Sacrifice. Love. The kind that costs everything and asks for nothing. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, heard her casual dismissal of Stanford like it meant nothing. It meant everything. Shawn got up and walked to the window. The estate stretched out in moonlight, peaceful and perfect. Through the trees, he could see lights still on in the main part of the house. He was about to turn away when he heard a voice. Catherine. She was in the hallway just outside his room, talking on her phone. Her voice was low but clear enough to carry through the thin gap under his door. I don't know what to do, Patricia. He's here. Living here. And it's so uncomfortable. Shawn moved closer to the door, his heart pounding. No, he says it's all gone. The company, the money, everything. I've been trying to verify it, but he won't give me details. Silence while the other person responded. That's what Daniel thinks too, that he's hiding something. But what if he's not? What if this is real? Another pause. Catherine's voice dropped even lower. I know I sound terrible. I know. But Patricia, I didn't sign up for this. I married a successful man. Someone ambitious. Someone powerful. And now he's out there pulling weeds like a hired hand and I don't even recognize him anymore. Shawn's chest constricted. It's not about the money. Okay, it's partly about the money. But it's more than that. I don't know who he is without the success. Does that make sense? Like his whole identity was wrapped up in being this titan of industry. And now that's gone and there's just this lost, broken man and I don't know how to be married to him. The words hit Shawn like physical blows. I feel guilty even saying this out loud, Catherine continued. But I look at him and I feel nothing. No attraction. No partnership. Just obligation. And I hate myself for it. But I can't help it. Another pause. Longer this time. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should talk to a lawyer. Just to explore options. I'm not saying divorce. I'm just saying I need to protect myself. Protect my future. Shawn stepped back from the door. Divorce. The word echoed in his head like a gunshot. He'd known the family's loyalty was conditional. He'd suspected his wife's love came with terms and conditions. But hearing it out loud, hearing her reduce 23 years of marriage to a calculation about her future, broke something inside him that he didn't know could break. I have to go, Catherine said suddenly. I think I heard something. I'll call you tomorrow. Footsteps moved away down the hall. Shawn stood frozen in the darkness of his room. His marriage was built on success, not love. It always had been. He'd just been too busy succeeding to notice. Catherine had fallen in love with billionaire Shawn. CEO Shawn. The man who commanded rooms and signed checks and made impossible things happen. She'd never loved broke Shawn. Lost Shawn. The man who pulled weeds and ate simple meals and had nothing to offer but himself. Because that man wasn't enough. Shawn walked to the bed and sat down heavily. His hands were shaking. His breath came short and fast. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his watch. The Patek Philippe. The symbol of everything he'd built. The emergency exit from this nightmare. One phone call. 1 hour. And his lawyer could send documentation proving the empire still existed. That this was all a test. That Shawn Allen, billionaire, had never actually left. He could end this right now. He held the watch up to the moonlight coming through the window. The metal was cold and heavy and real. But ending it now would be a lie too, because the truth wasn't finished. The test wasn't about whether his family could survive his poverty. It was about whether their love could survive without his wealth. And so far, the answer was devastating. But Shawn had started this for a reason. He'd stripped away everything because he needed to know the truth. The complete, unfiltered, brutal truth. And you don't get truth by running from it halfway through. Shawn put the watch back in his pocket. He'd finish what he started, no matter how much it cost him. Through the window, the first hint of dawn touched the horizon. Light breaking through darkness. But Shawn felt no relief. Just exhaustion. The kind that lives in your bones and never fully leaves. He lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, waiting for morning, wondering if the worst was over. It wasn't. The worst was yet to come. Morning came with heavy clouds and the promise of rain. Shawn woke early, his body tense, his mind clear. Last night had clarified everything. The test had run its course. He had his answer. Now it was time for them to have theirs. He showered, dressed in the same worn clothes, and went downstairs. The house was waking slowly. He could hear movement in the kitchen, voices in distant rooms. Shawn walked into the living room and began setting up. He placed his watch on the coffee table. Then his phone powered off. Then a folder of documents he'd kept hidden in his bag since arriving. Corporate filings, bank statements, legal proof that his empire hadn't collapsed at all. By 8:30, everyone had gathered for breakfast. Daniel, Rebecca, Catherine, Marcus Jr., and Lily. Shawn stood near the fireplace watching them file in. Some looked confused. Some looked annoyed. Catherine wouldn't meet his eyes. "I need everyone here," Shawn said calmly. "All of you, right now." Rebecca sighed. "Shawn, we're busy. If this is about your situation, it's about all of our situations." His voice was steady, quiet, but there was something in it that made everyone stop. "Sit down, please." They sat. Reluctantly, but they sat. Shawn looked at each of them in turn. His brother, his sister, his wife, his son. People he'd spent his entire adult life protecting, providing for, sacrificing for. People who'd abandoned him the moment he appeared to be broken. "I want to tell you something," Shawn began, "and I need you to listen without interrupting." Daniel crossed his arms. "This better not be another guilt trip." "It's not." Shawn walked to the coffee table and picked up his watch. "I didn't lose the company." Silence. "What?" Rebecca leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean the collapse was fake. The bankruptcy, the legal troubles, all of it. None of it was real." Catherine stood up, her face flushing. "Are you joking right now?" "No." Shawn set the watch down and picked up the documents. "The company is fine. Better than fine. The company is fine. Better than fine, actually. Revenue is up 12% this quarter. We just closed a deal with a German logistics firm that will expand operations into 6 new countries." He placed the documents on the table. "Everything I told you was a lie." The room exploded. "What the hell, Shawn?" Daniel shot to his feet. "You lied to us? For what? Some kind of sick game?" Rebecca's face went white. "I don't understand. You came here looking like that, saying you lost everything. Because I needed to know the truth," Shawn said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I needed to know who would stay when the money was gone." "That's manipulation." Catherine's voice was shaking. "That's cruel and manipulative and what you did wasn't?" Shawn turned to her, his eyes hard. "I heard you last night, Catherine, on the phone with Patricia, talking about lawyers, about protecting your future, about how you don't know who I am without success." Catherine's mouth opened, closed. No words came out. "You're damn right it was a test," Shawn continued, looking around the room. And every single one of you failed. That's not fair, Marcus Jr. said quietly. Isn't it? Shawn's voice rose slightly. I came here a week ago looking broken, looking lost, and not one of you asked if I was okay. Not one of you sat with me. Not one of you said we'll figure this out together. He pointed at Daniel. You told me to go to a hotel. At Rebecca. You worried about your reputation. Catherine. You stepped back like I was contagious. At Marcus Jr. You couldn't even look at me. We were protecting ourselves, Daniel said defensively. You said you had legal problems. You said everything was gone. What were we supposed to do? Be my family. Shawn's voice cracked. That's what you were supposed to do. But instead you calculated. You measured. You decided I wasn't worth the risk. Rebecca stood up, her arms crossed. So what was the right answer, Shawn? Pretend everything was fine? Ignore reality? The right answer was compassion. Shawn's voice dropped back to quiet intensity. The right answer was to see me as a person, not a portfolio. He walked to the window, looking out at the grounds he'd paid for, the gardens he'd designed, the life he'd built for them. I watched who offered me water. I watched who looked away. I watched who mocked me for pulling weeds. I watched who made me sleep above the garage like I didn't belong in my own house. He turned back to face them. And I watched who stayed. His eyes found Lily. She sat perfectly still, her face pale, her eyes wide with confusion and something else. Understanding, maybe, or heartbreak. I don't understand, Lily said softly. Dad? You're saying none of it was real? The poverty wasn't real, Shawn said gently. But everything else was. Your response was real. Their response was real. So what about Stanford? Her voice trembled. I canceled Stanford for you. Shawn felt his throat tighten. I know. I found the receipt. And you didn't say anything? Because I needed to see it through. I needed to see what each of you would do when you thought I had nothing. Lily stood up slowly. Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. You let me give up my future for a lie? No. Shawn moved toward her. Lily, you didn't give up anything for a lie. You gave it up for love. Real love. The kind that doesn't calculate cost. But it was all fake. Your love wasn't fake, Shawn said, his own voice breaking now. That's the point. You were the only one who saw me as your father. Not as my bank account. Not as my status. Just me. Daniel made a disgusted sound. This is unbelievable. You manipulated all of us, put us through hell, made us feel guilty, and now you're standing here like you have the moral high ground. I'm standing here, Shawn said quietly, like a man who just learned that 20 years of sacrifice meant nothing to the people he sacrificed for. That's not true, Catherine said, but her voice was weak. Isn't it? Shawn looked at her. You were ready to divorce me. After 23 years of marriage, 1 week of struggle, and you were calling lawyers. I was scared. Of what? Poverty? Or being seen with someone poor? Catherine's face crumpled. That's not fair, Shawn. None of this is fair, Catherine. But it's true. The room fell into heavy silence. Rain began to fall outside, drops hitting the windows in soft percussion. Rebecca broke the silence. So what now? You revealed your big secret. You proved we're all terrible people. What do you want from us? Apologies? Groveling? I don't want anything, Shawn said. I already got what I came for. The truth. He picked up his watch and fastened it around his wrist. Then his phone. Then the documents, sliding them back into the folder. The truth is that success attracts applause. But loss reveals character. And I've seen yours. Marcus Jr. stood up, his face red. Dad, you can't just. I can, Shawn interrupted. And I am. He turned to Lily. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. You, he said softly. are the only person in this room who understood what family means. The only one who chose me over comfort, over security, over what people might think. But I chose based on a lie, Lily whispered. You chose based on love. That's not a lie. That's the truest thing that happened here. Shawn walked toward the door, then stopped. He looked back at his family one last time. I'll make sure Stanford is handled, he said to Lily. You're going. Full scholarship reinstated. I'll take care of it. Dad. And the rest of you? His eyes moved across Daniel, Rebecca, Catherine, Marcus Jr. I'll make sure you're taken care of too. Financially. Because apparently, that's all this family was ever about. He opened the door. Shawn, wait. Catherine moved toward him. Please, can we talk about this? We just did. And he walked out. The door closed behind him, and for a long moment, nobody in the room moved. Then Lily stood up, walked past her mother, past her uncle and aunt and brother, and followed her father out into the rain. Shawn stood in the driveway, rain soaking through his clothes. The same driveway where he'd arrived a week ago. The same gate where he'd felt like a stranger. He felt like a stranger now too, but for different reasons. Dad! He turned and saw Lily running toward him, her hair plastered to her face, her dress heavy with rain. She stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. You can't just leave like this. I think I can. No. Not without talking to me. She wiped rain from her eyes. You put me through that. You let me think you were broken. You let me give up everything. I know. Shawn's voice was heavy with regret. And I'm sorry. I never meant for you to sacrifice anything. But I did. And now you're telling me it meant nothing. It meant everything, Lily. That's what you're not hearing. Shawn moved closer to her. Everyone else showed me who they are when things get hard. They retreat. They protect themselves. They calculate worth based on what you can give them. He reached out and gently pushed wet hair from her face. But you showed me something different. You showed me that real love doesn't need reasons. It doesn't need justification. It just is. Lily's lip trembled. I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot. You're the only one who got it right. But you lied to me. I did. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Shawn's voice broke slightly. But your response to that lie revealed something true. You loved me when you thought I had nothing. That's rarer than you think. Behind them, the front door opened. Catherine stood in the doorway watching, not coming closer, just watching. Lily glanced back, then returned her attention to Shawn. What happens now? Now you go to Stanford. You live your life. You become whoever you're meant to be. And you? Shawn smiled sadly. I figure out what comes next. Away from all this. You're leaving permanently? I don't know yet. But I know I can't stay in a place where I have to be successful to be loved. Lily was quiet for a moment. Rain continued to fall around them, washing everything clean. Or trying to. I'm angry at you, she said finally. For lying. For testing us. For making me feel like I had to choose. You should be angry. But I'm not angry that I chose you. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce despite the tears. Even knowing it was a test. Even knowing you didn't actually need me. I'd make the same choice. Shawn pulled her into a hug. She resisted for a second, then collapsed against him, sobbing. I love you, he whispered. Not because you passed some test, but because you're you. And that has nothing to do with money or success or any of it. They stood there in the rain for a long time. Long enough for Catherine to retreat back inside. Long enough for the storm to intensify, then begin to ease. Finally, Lily pulled back. You promise Stanford is handled? I promise. And you'll call me? Like actually call. Not just text. Every week. Every week. She repeated firmly. Shawn nodded. Every week. Lily started walking back toward the house. Then paused. Dad? For what it's worth. I think you were wrong to test them. But I think they were wrong too. About all of it. Yeah, Shawn said quietly. I think we were all wrong about a lot of things. She went inside. Shawn stood alone in the driveway as the rain softened to mist. Through the windows, he could see shapes moving. His family processing what had just happened. Trying to make sense of it. He pulled out his phone and called his driver. I need a pickup. The estate. 20 minutes. Then he called his lawyer. Marcus, it's me. Yeah, I'm done. Reinstate everything. And I need you to handle something for Stanford University. My daughter's enrollment. Make sure it's perfect. He ended the call and looked back at the house one last time. Shawn had spent 40 years building an empire to protect the people he loved. He'd worked himself to exhaustion, missed moments he could never get back, sacrificed pieces of himself he'd never recover. And in 7 days, he'd learned that most of them would abandon him the moment the empire showed cracks. Except one. One person had chosen him over everything else. Had looked past the money and the status and the fear, and simply loved him. That was the lesson. That was the truth worth discovering. Wealth attracts applause. Success draws crowds. Power opens doors. But loss reveals love. Real love doesn't follow success. Tests it. Challenges it. Proves itself in the absence of everything else. And real love, Shawn had learned, was the rarest fortune of all. A black car pulled up to the gate. Shawn walked toward it, carrying nothing but the bag he'd arrived with and the weight of everything he'd learned. As the car pulled away, he looked back one last time. The mansion grew smaller in the distance. The life he'd built, the family he'd provided for, all of it still there, all of it waiting. But Shawn knew now that home wasn't a place you paid for. It was the people who chose you when you had nothing left to give. And he'd just learned exactly who those people were. The car turned onto the main road, and the estate disappeared from view. Shawn closed his eyes, exhaled slowly, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Free.